on June 5, 2026, Donald Trump flew to a farm in Wisconsin and told struggling farmers they were living in a golden age. 70% of American farmers say they cannot afford the fertilizer. They need to plant their own fields right now. Farm bankruptcies in Wisconsin alone shot up 700% in 2025, and the country the president was blaming for this pain? That same country quietly supplies more than 80% of the fertilizer keeping those farms alive. Welcome to Global Sketch, where we go past the speech and into the supply chain. Subscribe right now, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why a barn in Wisconsin connects directly to a mine in Saskatchewan, a choke point in the Persian Gulf, and a deal signed in Beijing, and what all of it means for the price of food on your table. Custer Farms, Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, June 5, 2026. A barn packed with farmers, local politicians, and cameras. A banner above the stage reading, "Fighting for American Farmers." President Trump's first Wisconsin visit of his second term, and the choice of location was not random. Why Wisconsin matters. Wisconsin is one of the tightest swing states in the country, decided by razor-thin margins in multiple recent election cycles. It is home to 64,800 farms, covering more than 14 million acres. Dairy, corn, soybeans, and cranberries are the backbone of the state's $104.8 billion agricultural economy. In 2025, Wisconsin recorded 16 Chapter 12 farm bankruptcy filings, a 700% increase from 2024. That made Wisconsin one of the fastest deteriorating farm states in the entire country. Trump spoke for the majority of the event. He talked about the reflecting pools in Washington. He complimented a former NFL player in the room. He recalled the 2024 assassination attempt he survived. And then he delivered the headline message: his policies have helped farmers. A golden age is underway and fertilizer prices will fall fast. The direct quote, confirmed by WPR and Al Jazeera, was this: "We're going to come out and your fertilizer prices are going to go way down, just like they were 4 months ago. Your fertilizer's down, your energy's down, your oil, your gas is all coming way down." No specific plan was presented. No timeline was anchored to any policy action. The promise was tied entirely to one thing: the war in Iran ending. Trump said the administration had largely finished the conflict one way or the other, but here is what those farmers already knew sitting in that barn. Their losses are not a forecast. They are already on the books. Before we follow the fertilizer supply chain, let us establish exactly how serious the farm economy crisis is, because the data tells a story the speech did not. The farm economy, by the numbers, 2025-2026. Total projected net cash income losses from 2025-26 crops, Saatats, $44 billion, NDSU Agricultural Risk Policy Center. Corn alone, $20 billion in losses. Soybeans, $10 billion. Wheat, $8.5 billion. Other crops, $6 billion combined. USDA total farm production expenses 2025, $467.4 billion, a record high, up $12 billion from 2024. Corn prices down almost 50% since 2022. Highs soybean prices down more than 40% since 2022. Highs urea fertilizer price still 24% higher than 1 year ago. Even after partial declines from peak sites, gas price at pump, $4.04 per gallon as of June 5, $1.08. Higher than a year ago, AA data. Chapter 12, Farm. Bankruptcies in 2025, 315 filings, up 46% from 2024's second consecutive annual increase. Jawan American Farm Bureau Federation survey, April 2026. 70% of farmers said they cannot afford all the fertilizer they need this season. American Soybean Association put it plainly, 2026 is shaping up to be the fourth consecutive year of substantial soybean production losses, the worst. Sustained stretch since the USDA's Economic Research Service tracked it in the early 2000s, 1/4 to 1/3 of row crop farmers in major agricultural states could be forced out of farming entirely if conditions do not improve, according to conversations between agricultural lenders and Farm Bureau officials. This is the context inside which the president stood in that barn and said, "Your life is much better than my life. I got elected. I don't need this. Now here is where the analysis gets genuinely important, because the cause of the fertilizer price surge is not the simple story being told in Wisconsin. Modern farming runs on 3 key nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Potassium is delivered to the soil via potash, and potash is where the United States has a structural vulnerability that no speech can paper over. The potash dependency verified data. U.S. domestic potash production, 2023, 400,000 tons. U.S. farmer potash consumption, 2023, 5.3 million tons. Import dependency, 90% of U.S. potash needs are imported. Canada's share of those imports, 80% plus, confirmed by U.S. Geological Survey. Canada's total potash reserves, 1.1 billion tons, over 1/3 of all global reserves. U.S. potash reserves, 220 million tons, not sufficient to meet domestic demand. Time required to build new potash mines, 10 to 15 years. Fertilizer Canada. Largest single producer, Nutrien Limited. Headquartered in Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan, the United States does not have a meaningful domestic potash industry. It cannot build one quickly, and the country it imports from by an overwhelming margin is Canada. The second major driver of the 2026 fertilizer crisis is the war. When the United States and Israel launched strikes against Iran on February 28th, Iran effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of global oil and a major share of nitrogen fertilizer ingredients flow. The Middle East is one of the world's largest exporters of urea, the nitrogen-based fertilizer that American corn and wheat farmers rely on. When Hormuz seized up, urea prices surged, diesel followed, and grain freight costs climbed directly behind. The contradiction at the heart of the Wisconsin visit. In December 2025, at the same Oval Office event where Trump announced a $12 billion farm bailout, he threatened to impose what he called very severe tariffs on Canadian fertilizer imports. A DOJ price-fixing investigation into Canadian fertilizer companies, including Nutrien, was simultaneously launched. Fertilizer Canada's official response: the U.S. does not have sufficient reserves to meet domestic demand. Imposing tariffs jeopardizes the deeply integrated, open trading relationship that is vital to North American agricultural producers. Translation: a tariff on Canadian potash is a tax on the American farmer, the same farmer Trump was promising to help. Wisconsin farmer in that barn, paying elevated fertilizer costs depending on Canadian potash to put a crop in the ground, was listening to a president who was simultaneously blaming Canada and threatening to make that very farmer's biggest input cost even higher. That is the circle that cannot be squared. While Trump was speaking in Wisconsin, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was doing something entirely different and far more strategically deliberate. When the Trump administration unveiled a new 10% tariff proposal on Canada in late May 2026, framed around forced labor concerns, Carney's public response was measured to the point of being almost boring. CBC News reported he simply said it was not a surprise that Canada actually supports fighting forced labor and that new Canadian legislation was already underway. No press conference fury, no escalation. That calm is not passivity. It is confidence, and the trade data explains why. Carney's diversification. Scorecard 2026. January 16, 2026. Carney travels to Beijing first. Canadian PM visit to China since 2017. Deal secured. China lowers tariffs on Canadian canola seed from 85% to 15%. By March 1st, a $4 billion canola market for Canadian producers. Canadian canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and peas also removed from Chinese anti-discrimination tariffs. Canada allows 49,000 Chinese EVs annually at a reduced tariff rate of 6.1%. China commits to visa-free access for Canadians traveling to China. Carney's stated target: double Canada's non-US exports over the next decade. New trade deals completed: Ecuador, Indonesia, investment deals with UAE, India talks restarted. Canada's position per Foreign Minister Anita Anand. Canada will step up and lead as a bridge between the EU and Pacific Rim nations. Canada still sends roughly 70% of its merchandise exports to the United States. Carney faces a structural constraint: you cannot redirect that dependency overnight. But the Beijing deal changed the negotiating atmosphere. The moment Canada demonstrated it has a credible alternative buyer for canola, the leverage dynamic shifted. Canadian canola competes directly with American soybeans in Asian markets. If Canadian producers gain easier access to Chinese markets while American soybean farmers are locked out by trade war restrictions, the competitive disadvantage for U.S. agriculture deepens further, and Nutrien, the Saskatchewan-based company that is the largest potash producer on Earth, knows exactly how much leverage its geography provides. No tariff threat changes the geological fact that Canada holds more than 1/3 of the world's potash reserves, and the U.S. holds enough to cover less than 8% of its own annual demand. There is one more data point that cuts through all of the optimistic messaging. In Wisconsin, the administration's own actions. In December 2025, the Trump administration rolled out a $12 billion agricultural aid package described as a bridge payment program for row crop farmers. At the Wisconsin event on June 5th, Trump signaled more relief was coming. An additional $14 billion figure had been under discussion. The bailout math. December 2025. Bailout. $12 billion, with $11 billion going to row crop farmers via bridge payments. Additional package under discussion, $14 billion to coverage gap. The $12 billion package was estimated to cover only about 25% of actual soybean losses. American Soybean Association. Cindy Brown, a kidney bean farmer in Chippewa Valley, Wisconsin, spoke at the same June 5th event. She said tariffs had blocked her exports to Dubai. The Strait of Hormuz blockade had increased freight costs, and there is no clear end in sight right now, and the longer this goes on, the more money farmers lose, and the darker the outlook becomes. Here is the logic problem embedded in that number. If the farm economy is in a golden age, if everything is moving in the right direction, if fertilizer and energy are coming down, then why does the administration keep writing billion-dollar relief checks? The bailout is a quiet admission of what the speech was designed not to say. The farm economy is under real strain. The crisis is ongoing, and the structural causes a war that has not ended. A supply chain dependent on a neighbor being threatened with tariffs. And 4 years of crop price compression are not resolved, and the relief payments are not evenly distributed. Multiple agricultural economists have noted that a disproportionate share of direct payment programs flows to larger operations, which means the small family farms that are filing Chapter 12 bankruptcy in record numbers are the ones least likely to be fully covered. No. Analysts not in Washington, not in Ottawa, not in Saskatchewan can tell you with certainty how this resolves, but the three scenarios are clearly visible. Road 1, the Iran war winds down on or near schedule. The Strait of Hormuz reopens. Urea prices fall back toward pre-war levels. Diesel stabilizes. The 90-day promise looks credible in retrospect. The Canada blame narrative fades. The bailout payments bridge the gap. This is the outcome the administration is betting on, and it requires a geopolitical development that no president can guarantee. Road 2. The administration follows through on the Canadian fertilizer tariff threat. Potash prices rise further. The cost lands directly on the American farmer. A political messaging problem becomes an actual input cost crisis in an election year. Fertilizer Canada's warning that the U.S. does not have sufficient reserves to meet domestic demand becomes the headline that was always available but ignored. Road 3. The war drags on. Carney continues deepening trade ties with China, the EU, and emerging markets. Canadian canola expands its share of Asian markets at the expense of American soybeans. Nutrien keeps selling potash to whoever offers the best price, and with China as a growing potash consumer, that is no longer exclusively the American market. The geographic and geological reality becomes undeniable. The country with the resource does not need to raise its voice. It simply needs to wait. The bottom line. The United States imports 90% of its potash. More than 80% comes from Canada. Canada holds 1/3 of global potash reserves. The U.S. holds enough to cover less than 8% of its own annual demand. Building new mines takes 10 to 15 years. The country being blamed for American farm pain is the same country keeping American farms operational. And the Prime Minister of that country just signed a deal with China, the world's largest potash consumer. The leverage map is not complicated, it just rarely gets read aloud in a Wisconsin barn. Here is what June 5, 2026 actually showed us. Farm bankruptcies in Wisconsin up 700%. 70% of farmers unable to afford full fertilizer needs. Projected losses of $44 billion across the 2025-26 crop cycle. And a speech promising a golden age delivered in a barn powered by Canadian Potash in a state that could decide the next election. The three inputs that will determine which of those three roads we travel are not controlled from the Wisconsin barn. They are the Strait of Hormuz, the Saskatchewan mines, and the trade ledger in Beijing. Two of those three are outside Washington's direct control. The third, the decision on whether to tariff Canadian fertilizer, is the one move that would turn a political problem into a verified supply chain catastrophe. Mark Carney does not need to give a fiery press conference. He has already made his moves quietly and in advance. The geography has always been on his side. The only question is whether Washington reads the map before it becomes necessary. Subscribe to Global Sketch. Share this with one person who thinks trade policy is abstract because this story ends at the grocery shelf. We will keep following every tariff, every shipment, and every quiet move out of Ottawa.